The loneliest discoveries are never hidden in dark places. They're waiting quietly inside the homes we thought we knew. By the time I unlocked the penthouse door, the roses had already begun to wilt. White lilies. Her favorite. I had bought them myself. Not because I remembered the date. Because my assistant reminded me 3 hours earlier. That realization would haunt me long after everything else. The city glittered beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting Manhattan in rivers of gold and silver. Rain tapped softly against the glass, blurring the skyline into something almost unreal. Everything looked beautiful. Except the silence. "Hannah?" My voice echoed through the living room. No answer. I loosened my tie and stepped farther inside. The dining table stood exactly where it always had. 2 porcelain plates. 2 crystal wine glasses. Candles burned low, their wax spilling onto the silver holders. Steam no longer rose from the food. She had been waiting. For a long time. A handwritten card rested beside my plate. "Happy anniversary. Love always, Hannah." The letters curved gently across the paper, as familiar to me as the ring on my finger. Or perhaps more familiar. I looked at my watch. 9:17 p.m. We were supposed to have dinner at 7. 2 hours late. Again. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. Another meeting. Another shipment. Another problem only Vincent Moretti could solve. There was always something more important. Until there wasn't. "Hannah?" I called again, louder this time. Nothing. The bedroom door stood half open. The soft lamp beside her nightstand was still glowing. Her favorite blue cardigan rested neatly across the chair. The closet door remained open. Several dresses still hung inside. Nothing looked rushed. Nothing looked broken. Nothing looked wrong. Which somehow made everything feel worse. I reached for my phone. No missed calls. No messages. No angry text asking where I was. That wasn't like Hannah. She always checked on me. Even when I didn't deserve it. I remembered the last thing she said that morning before I left. "Don't work too late tonight." She had smiled when she said it. A small smile. The kind that asked for very little. I made something special. Without looking up from the documents in my hands, I kissed her forehead. "I won't be long." Those had been my last words. Promises are strange. Sometimes they don't become lies until hours later. A faint breeze drifted through the apartment. One of the balcony doors was slightly open. Rain-scented air slipped quietly into the room. I walked outside. The city stretched endlessly below. The chair where Hannah loved reading was empty. Her coffee mug sat untouched on the small table. Cold. Half full. She hadn't planned to leave. At least, not at first. Something tightened inside my chest. A feeling I couldn't name. Not fear. Not yet. Instinct. The kind that had kept me alive through years of dangerous decisions. I hurried back inside. "Hannah!" My voice no longer sounded calm. I searched every room. Guest bedroom. Library. Home office. Bathroom. Nothing. The silence grew louder with every door I opened. Then I noticed it. On the bedroom floor. Near her side of the bed. A single white slipper. Lying on its side. As though someone had stepped out of it without ever intending to put it back on. I picked it up slowly. Still warm. Or maybe. I only imagined it. For the first time in years, my hands were shaking. Not because I feared an enemy. Not because I feared losing power. Because somewhere inside me, a quiet voice whispered the one possibility I refused to believe. This wasn't a wife waiting for her husband anymore. This was a wife who had finally stopped waiting. Some truths don't break your heart the moment you find them. They wait. Until you understand what they mean. The slipper remained in my hand as I stood in the middle of our bedroom. Rain whispered against the windows. The apartment felt impossibly large. Every room carried Hannah's presence. Yet she was nowhere inside it. I forced myself to breathe. Think. She had left no message. No argument. No shattered glass. No signs of fear. Nothing. Hannah never disappeared without saying goodbye. Never. My eyes swept across the room again. Then stopped. Her jewelry box. The lid was open. Inside, her wedding ring rested on a small velvet cushion. For several seconds, I couldn't move. She had never taken it off. Not while sleeping. Not while showering. Not even when she kneaded dough every Sunday morning. I reached toward it carefully. The gold band still reflected the soft bedside lamp. A tiny scratch crossed its surface. I remembered exactly when it happened. Our honeymoon. She had laughed after accidentally brushing it against a stone railing in Italy. It's proof we actually live today. She had smiled. I smiled too. Back then. I still knew how. I closed my fingers around the ring. It felt strangely cold. Something inside the jewelry box caught my attention. A corner of white paper. Folded. Hidden beneath a silk scarf. For one impossible second, I believed it was a letter. An explanation. An address. Hope can be incredibly cruel. I unfolded the paper slowly. It wasn't a letter. It was a receipt. A neighborhood pharmacy. Yesterday afternoon. One item purchased. Nothing else. My heartbeat quickened. Why would Hannah drive across town for a pharmacy receipt? She usually ordered everything online. Almost without thinking. I followed the direction my instincts pulled me. Bathroom. The light was still on. Her lavender candle had burned halfway down. The mirror still carried tiny water spots from this morning. Her toothbrush stood beside mine. Exactly where it belonged. Everything looked untouched. Until I opened the cabinet beneath the sink. Extra towels. First aid kit. Cleaning supplies. A small white gift bag. I frowned. I had never seen it before. The tissue paper inside had already been opened. My fingers hesitated. Then reached in. A tiny plastic stick rested at the bottom. White. Simple. Ordinary. Until I turned it over. Two unmistakable pink lines. The room disappeared. My knees weakened. I leaned both hands against the sink. No. No. Hannah was pregnant. She had been carrying our child. And she had never told me. Or maybe she had tried. My mind raced through the past few weeks. She had canceled wine at dinner. She looked tired more often. She smiled every time she placed her hand across her stomach. I thought she was simply exhausted. God. She had been waiting for the right moment. Perhaps tonight. Our anniversary. The dinner. The candles. The card. The lilies. She had planned to surprise me. Instead, I gave her another empty chair. I searched the gift bag again. This time my fingers found something else. A folded sheet of stationery. Only half written. The ink stopped abruptly in the middle of the page. My dearest Vincent, if you're reading this, I couldn't find the courage to tell you face to face. I kept imagining your smile. I wanted tonight to be perfect because... The sentence ended there. Nothing else. No signature. No explanation. Just unfinished words. As though something, or someone, had interrupted her. For the first time in my adult life, the man everyone called fearless felt completely powerless. Not because I had enemies. Not because someone threatened my empire. But because somewhere beyond these walls, the woman who carried my child had vanished. And I had absolutely no idea why. Money can buy information. Power can command loyalty. Fear can silence enemies. But none of them can tell you where the woman you love has gone. The pregnancy test still rested in my hand when my phone vibrated. I answered before the second ring. Luca. My head of security recognized something in my voice immediately. Boss? I need everyone. No explanation. No hesitation. 10 minutes. The line went dead. I looked around the apartment one last time. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing had been broken. Only one person was missing. And somehow, that made the place feel emptier than any battlefield I had ever walked through. 23 minutes later. The conference room beneath my private office filled with people. Security specialists. Former intelligence officers. Cyber analysts. Men who had spent years finding people who never wanted to be found. A giant digital map of New York illuminated the room. Every eye turned toward me. Hannah Moretti. Her photograph appeared across every screen. Smiling. Wearing the oversized sweater she loved stealing from my closet. 20 years old. 5'6". Kind eyes. The most beautiful woman in the room. Not because of how she looked. Because of how she loved. I want everything. My voice sounded strangely calm. Traffic cameras. Airports. Train stations. Rideshare records. Credit cards. Hospitals. Hotels. No warrants. No delays. If someone asked questions, they answered to me. Luca nodded once. It starts now. Within seconds, the room exploded into motion. Keyboards clicked. Phones rang. Maps updated. Satellite images appeared. Millions of dollars worth of technology activated for one purpose: finding Hannah. I watched the city transform into glowing lines across giant screens. Every bridge. Every highway. Every subway entrance. My empire could see almost everything. Except her. 37 minutes later. Nothing. An analyst looked uncomfortable saying it. No phone activity. Her credit cards haven't been used. No ATM withdrawals. No airline reservations. Another voice joined. Her passport remains inactive. Another. No hospital admissions. Another. No rides. Another. No surveillance hits. Silence settled over the room. Impossible. People didn't simply disappear. Not anymore. Not in my city. Unless they wanted to. I walked toward the largest monitor. Hannah left carrying almost nothing. She abandoned her wedding ring. She left her passport. She left her laptop. I looked slowly around the room. Ask yourselves why? Nobody answered. Because everyone already understood. This wasn't an escape from danger. It was an escape from a life. Luca approached quietly. We'll expand nationwide. I nodded. Immediately. He hesitated. Then asked the question nobody else dared to ask. Boss, do you think Mrs. Moretti left willingly? The words hit harder than any bullet ever had. I remembered the unfinished letter. The anniversary dinner. The candles. The pregnancy test. Nothing fit together. No, I answered honestly. I think she made a decision. Those aren't always the same thing. Luca frowned. Before he could respond, one of the analysts suddenly stood. Sir? A security camera appeared on the main screen. Timestamp. 5:42 p.m. Our apartment building. Hannah walked through the lobby alone. She carried one small canvas bag. Nothing else. She stopped at the front desk. Smiled at the doorman. Said something. Then stepped outside into the rain. No one followed her. No black cars. No suspicious faces. No visible threat. She simply walked away. The footage continued. Across the street. She paused beneath a bus stop. Looked back once. Toward our building. Toward our home. Toward the life she had quietly built around a man who was almost never there. Even through silent security footage, I could see it. She wasn't angry. She wasn't afraid. She looked heartbroken. The bus arrived. Its doors opened. Hannah stepped inside without looking back again. The screen froze. Route number 18. Destination. Unknown. For the first time since building an empire powerful enough to make cities tremble, I realized the hardest person in the world to find was the one who never wanted to be chased. Every place remembers a version of us. Sometimes, it remembers one we were too busy to notice. Route 18. That single number became the center of my world. The bus company handed over every surveillance recording within the hour. I watched Hannah board, sit by the window, fold her hands across her lap. She wasn't crying. That hurt more. People cry when they're hoping someone will stop them. Hannah simply stared through the rain, as if she had already accepted something long before she stepped onto that bus. The footage ended 43 minutes later. Queens. She got off near a small neighborhood cafe, walked 2 blocks, then disappeared into a crowd. No cameras. No clear angle. She vanished again. I should have felt frustrated. Instead, I asked Luca to drive. No security convoy. He looked surprised. Just us. The city blurred outside the windshield. For years, these streets had belonged to me. Every district. Every business. Every alliance. Yet tonight, I wasn't crossing my city. I was retracing my wife's footsteps. We stopped outside the cafe. It was already closed. Rainwater shimmered beneath the streetlights. The owner recognized Hannah immediately. Sweet girl. He smiled sadly. She came here a lot. A lot? I turned slowly. How often? Almost every Thursday. Thursday. The day I always stayed late at work. The owner wiped another coffee cup before speaking again. She always ordered hot chocolate. Sat by the window. And waited. My throat tightened. Waiting for someone? He nodded. Her husband. Silence filled the room. Did he ever come? The old man looked at me with kind eyes. Not once. His words landed gently, which somehow made them hurt even more. Back inside the car, nobody spoke. Luca stared out the windshield, pretending not to notice the expression on my face. I remembered every Thursday meeting, every contract, every shipment, every negotiation. I remembered telling Hannah, next week. I promise. Apparently, next week had lasted 3 years. Our next stop was a small bookstore. The owner smiled the moment he saw Hannah's picture. Oh, she loved this place. What did she buy? I asked. He pointed toward a shelf. Children's books. My heartbeat stopped. Children's books. Weeks before she told me. Or tried to. He pulled out a receipt from an old register. She asked me to special order this one. He handed me the title. How to Become the World's Best Dad. Still wrapped. Never collected. I couldn't breathe. She had imagined our future, while I kept postponing our present. As we left, a folded bookmark slipped from inside the book. Written in Hannah's familiar handwriting. One simple sentence. He'll be wonderful, once he remembers to come home. She still believed in me. Even then. Even after all the missed dinners. All the forgotten anniversaries. All the empty chairs. The rain had finally stopped. Clouds drifted apart above the skyline. For the first time since Hannah disappeared, I wasn't chasing clues anymore. I was walking through the quiet museum of a marriage I had taken for granted. Every street held a memory. Every memory carried another apology I never spoke. And with each place I visited, I realized something far more terrifying than losing Hannah. She hadn't disappeared from my life in a single night. I had been slowly disappearing from hers. One broken promise at a time. Love doesn't always leave because it dies. Sometimes, it leaves because it believes it has become a burden. 300 miles from Manhattan. The ocean never asked questions. It simply came and went with the tide. I watched the sunrise through the tiny apartment window above the bakery. Salt lingered in the morning air. The room smelled faintly of fresh bread drifting up from downstairs. It wasn't much. One bed. One table. One rocking chair beside the window. But for the first time in years, silence didn't feel lonely. It felt safe. I rested both hands across my stomach. Still too early for anyone else to notice. But I knew. Every morning. I knew. Mrs. Evelyn, the elderly owner of the bakery, smiled as I tied my apron. "Morning, sweetheart." "Morning. Feeling better today?" I nodded. "A little." She never asked why a married woman had arrived alone. Never asked why I cried in my sleep during the first week. Never asked why I wore a wedding ring on a chain around my neck instead of my finger. Kind people understand that some wounds introduce themselves when they're ready. Others don't. Customers drifted in with the morning tide. Fishermen. Teachers. Retired couples. Children buying cinnamon rolls before school. No one recognized me. No one knew my husband owned half the city. To them, I was simply Hannah, the new girl who baked blueberry muffins a little too carefully. During my lunch break, I sat on the wooden bench facing the sea. The baby book rested in my lap. The same one I had almost given Vincent on our anniversary. Inside the cover, I had written only one sentence. "For the father I never stopped believing in." My fingers traced the words gently. I still believed them. That was the hardest part. People assume women leave because they stop loving. Sometimes, they leave because loving hurts too much. I remembered every anniversary dinner eaten alone. Every birthday postponed because of another emergency. Every promise wrapped in the words, "soon." Vincent never stopped providing. He never stopped protecting. He never stopped loving me. In the only language he had ever learned. But I needed his time. Not his empire. When I discovered I was pregnant, I imagined telling him 100 different ways. A tiny pair of shoes. A framed ultrasound. A handwritten letter. Instead, I imagined something else. His phone ringing. Another meeting. Another crisis. Another apology. I couldn't bear watching our child learn to wait for him. The way I had. A little girl approached my bench. She couldn't have been older than 6. She looked at my stomach. "My mommy says babies can hear voices." I smiled. "They probably can." She grinned. "Then you should tell your baby happy things." Before running back toward the beach, she waved. The words stayed with me long after she disappeared. Happy things? I looked toward the endless horizon. "I hope you have your father's courage," I whispered. "And I hope..." A tear slipped quietly down my cheek. "You never inherit his loneliness." Far away. Somewhere beyond the ocean breeze and quiet streets. Vincent was probably searching every corner of New York. Looking for me. He still didn't understand. I hadn't disappeared because I doubted his love. I disappeared because I doubted there would ever be enough of it left. For 3 hearts instead of 2. The strongest apology is not spoken. It's lived. The address came from somewhere I never expected. Not from my analysts. Not from surveillance. Not from the millions I had spent searching. Mrs. Evelyn called. The owner of the little bakery by the sea. She had found my number inside the emergency contact card Hannah carried in her wallet. "I think," the elderly woman said gently, "there's someone here who still belongs with you." 4 hours later, the ocean stretched endlessly before me. I left the car at the edge of the small coastal town. No bodyguards. No convoy. No weapons. Only a man carrying more regret than luggage. The bakery looked exactly as Luca had described. Warm lights. Fresh bread. Blue shutters. Simple. Peaceful. The kind of place Hannah had always loved. Through the front window, I saw her. She stood behind the counter, laughing softly as she handed a paper bag to an elderly customer. My heart stopped. She looked healthy. Calmer. Her smile wasn't as bright as before. But it was real. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. The bell above the door chimed. Hannah looked up. Our eyes met. The smile faded. Neither of us moved. The room suddenly felt very small. I found you, I whispered. She lowered her eyes. I never wanted to be hidden. I stepped closer. I've searched everywhere. I know. You knew? She nodded. I saw the news. The newspapers. The television reports. The rewards. The city searching for one missing woman. I thought you'd be angry. She gave a tired smile. I wasn't angry, Vincent. That answer hurt more than if she had shouted. I was tired. Silence settled between us. The kind only married people understand. The silence built from thousands of conversations that never happened. I noticed her hand resting instinctively against her stomach. My eyes followed the movement. She didn't pull away. You know. It wasn't a question. I nodded. I found the test. A tear escaped before she could stop it. I wanted to tell you that night. I know. I wanted everything to be perfect. I know. I thought. Her voice broke. Our baby deserved a father who came home. Every word struck with quiet precision. No accusations. No blame. Only truth. I looked around the little bakery. At the flower on her apron. The tiny apartment staircase. The peaceful life she had created without me. I can't erase what I did. She remained silent. I can't ask you to forget. Still silence. So I won't. For the first time. I dropped to one knee. Not because I planned it. Because my legs could no longer carry the weight of my regret. I won't ask you to come home today. I won't ask you tomorrow. I won't ask you at all. I looked into her eyes. I'll build a life worth coming back to. Another tear rolled down her cheek. You always knew how to make promises. I know. This time. I took off the ring I had worn every day since our wedding. Placed it gently on the wooden counter between us. I'm not asking you to trust my words. I'm asking for the chance to prove them. The bakery fell silent. Even the waves outside seemed to pause. Hannah looked at the ring. Then at me. She didn't step forward. She didn't walk away. Instead, she whispered the smallest sentence I had ever fought to deserve. Then show me. Changing your life doesn't happen in one grand moment. It happens in the quiet choices no one applauds. I rented a small apartment above the hardware store across from the bakery. 1 bedroom. 1 kitchen. 1 wooden table. It was smaller than the walk-in closet inside our Manhattan penthouse. It was also the first home I had ever chosen because someone I loved lived nearby. Every morning, I crossed the street before sunrise. Not to see Hannah. Not yet. I kept my promise. I would earn her trust. Not demand it. Mrs. Evelyn handed me an apron on my second day. I've never baked bread before, I admitted. She laughed. Then today is a good day to begin. The flour covered my black shirt within minutes. The dough refused to cooperate. I burned 2 trays of rolls. Dropped an entire basket of croissants. By noon, I looked less like a man who built an empire and more like someone who had lost a fight with a bag of flour. The customers smiled. No one recognized me. No one cared who I had been. Only who I was willing to become. Across the room, Hannah watched quietly while arranging fresh pastries in the display case. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She simply observed. That was enough. One afternoon, an elderly customer struggled to carry several grocery bags toward her car. Without thinking, I walked over. May I help you? She nodded gratefully. The walk took less than 2 minutes. When I returned, Hannah was standing outside the bakery. You never used to notice things like that. I know. You were always in a hurry. I know. She studied my face for several long seconds. I don't recognize you. I looked toward the ocean. Neither do I. For the first time. She almost smiled. Weeks passed. I stopped attending meetings in New York. Luca called almost every day. There are decisions only you can make. Then teach someone else. The organization needs you. My family needs me more. Silence filled the line. Nobody had ever heard Vincent Moretti say those words before. I sold several businesses. Transferred responsibilities. Ended partnerships that had consumed every hour of my life. People assumed I had grown weaker. They were wrong. Walking away from power demanded more strength than holding on to it ever had. One evening, rain began falling just as the bakery closed. Hannah stepped outside carrying an umbrella. She hesitated, then held it over both of us. Neither of us spoke. We simply walked through the quiet streets together. Halfway home, she suddenly stopped. The baby kicked. Her voice barely rose above the rain. I looked at her uncertainly. Can I? She answered by gently taking my hand. She placed it against her stomach. At first, nothing. Then, a tiny movement. Soft. Brief. Almost impossible to describe. My breath caught. Another little kick. Our child. Real. Alive. Waiting. A tear slipped down my face before I noticed it. Hannah looked at me with eyes filled not with certainty, but possibility. I wanted you to feel that months ago. Her words carried sadness, not anger. I know. I'm sorry. I know. The rain continued falling around us. For the first time since our anniversary, neither of us looked toward the past. We stood together in the present, listening to the smallest heartbeat that had somehow become the loudest reason either of us had ever found to begin again. The first cry of a child can silence years of regret. Nothing in my life had prepared me for that sound. It was just after midnight when Hannah touched my shoulder. Her face had gone pale. She tried to smile anyway. I think. She paused, breathing carefully. It's time. Within minutes, Mrs. Evelyn was driving us toward the small community hospital overlooking the coast. The rain had returned. Not violent. Gentle. Like the sky itself had chosen to whisper instead of speak. I sat beside Hannah in the back seat. This time, I wasn't answering phone calls. I wasn't reading reports. I wasn't thinking about money. I simply held her hand. Every contraction tightened around her like another wave. Each time, she squeezed my fingers. Each time I whispered, I'm here. Simple words. Words I should have said years ago. The maternity ward was quiet. The nurses welcomed us with calm smiles. No one recognized my name. No one cared about the empire I had left behind. Tonight, I wasn't Vincent Moretti, the Mafia Boss. I was just a husband terrified of losing the woman he loved. A nurse guided Hannah toward the delivery room. She stopped at the doorway. Turned back. Looked directly into my eyes. Don't leave. 3 words. 3 words that erased every broken promise I had ever made. I won't. And this time, I meant them. Hours passed like entire lifetimes. The clock moved. I didn't. I remained outside the delivery room, listening to muffled voices behind the closed door. Every sound made my heart race. Every silence frightened me even more. Mrs. Evelyn sat beside me. She rested one gentle hand over mine. She's stronger than she knows. I nodded. So am I. She smiled knowingly. No, she said softly. Now you're becoming strong. There was a difference. For years, strength had meant control. Power. Fear. Winning. Tonight, strength meant waiting. Trusting. Praying. The delivery room suddenly grew louder. Another contraction. Another encouraging voice. Then, silence. A silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. 1 second. 2. 3. And then, a newborn's cry filled the hallway. Clear. Powerful. Beautiful. My knees nearly gave way. The door opened. A smiling nurse stepped into the corridor. Congratulations. You have a healthy baby girl. I couldn't speak. I simply covered my face with both hands as tears slipped through my fingers. Not hidden. Not controlled. Freely. For the first time in my life. I cried without shame. A few minutes later, they invited me inside. Hannah looked exhausted. Radiant. She held our daughter against her chest. The tiny blanket barely covered her. A few wisps of dark hair framed her tiny face. She opened her eyes for only a moment. Long enough to wrap impossibly small fingers around one of mine. I had negotiated billion-dollar deals without hesitation. Yet I couldn't stop my hand from trembling. "Meet your daughter," Hannah whispered. I looked at both of them. The family I had almost lost. The future I had nearly abandoned without realizing it. I kissed Hannah's forehead gently. Then leaned closer to our little girl. "I spent my whole life building something I thought would last forever." My voice broke. "But you..." Another tear escaped before I finished. "You became my forever, the moment you took your first breath." The greatest empires are never built from power. They're built from the people who choose to stay. 1 year later. The ocean still greeted the morning before the rest of the town awoke. The bakery smelled of cinnamon and warm bread. Mrs. Evelyn had finally retired. She insisted she was too old to wake up before sunrise. The truth was simpler. She wanted us to have the life she had quietly protected. Hannah stood behind the counter, laughing as our daughter reached for a cookie that was much too big for her tiny hands. "Emma," Hannah said with a smile. "1 cookie." Our little girl answered with the confident grin only 2-year-olds believe can solve every problem. I leaned against the doorway, watching them. For years, I had searched for peace in expensive places. Private islands. Luxury homes. Penthouse views. It turned out peace smelled like fresh bread. And sounded like my daughter's laughter. "Honey?" Hannah looked over. "We're going to be late." I laughed. "I know." She raised an eyebrow. "You used to say that before every missed anniversary." "I remember. And I don't anymore." She smiled. The kind of smile that had once become painfully rare. Now, it felt like sunrise. That evening, we closed the bakery early. Exactly 1 year had passed since the night Hannah disappeared. Or perhaps, the night we finally found each other again. The dining table inside our little home overlooked the sea. 3 plates. 3 glasses. 3 chairs. One of them much smaller than the others. Emma insisted on feeding herself. Most of the pasta landed on the floor. Neither of us cared. After dinner, Hannah disappeared upstairs for a moment. When she returned, she carried a small wooden box. "I found this while unpacking." She placed it gently in front of me. Inside, my wedding ring. The one I had left on the bakery counter. Beside it rested another familiar object. The pregnancy test. Still wrapped carefully inside tissue paper. I looked at Hannah. "You kept it?" She nodded. "It reminds me." "Of what?" She reached across the table and intertwined her fingers with mine. "That sometimes," she smiled softly, "the worst night of your life becomes the first page of your best one." Emma climbed into my lap, resting her tiny head against my chest. Outside, the waves rolled quietly toward the shore. Just as they had the day Hannah arrived. Just as they would long after we were gone. I looked at the 2 people who had rewritten my life without ever asking for power. Then I placed the pregnancy test back inside the box. Not as a reminder of fear, but as proof that miracles rarely announce themselves with fireworks. Sometimes, they arrive as 2 quiet pink lines. Sometimes, they leave to teach us how to come home. I kissed Hannah gently. Then our daughter. "I once believed I ruled the city," I whispered. "But love never asked me to rule. Only to be present. And for the rest of my life. That would be the only promise I could never afford to break."